Hello friends, I'm back with another fantastic science fiction story. In this episode, I'll tell you the story of Joseph and the alien woman Lucy. Refresh your coffees and sit back, our story is about to begin. I repaired the alien woman's ship, and her friends started shouting, "Marry a human!" Halfrest Depot was the kind of place the universe kept around the way you keep a broken chair in the garage. Not because it was useful, but because throwing it out felt like more effort than it was worth. A single sun-blistered rock bolted to the edge of Ardessi space. It existed for exactly one reason. Ships needed fuel, and fuel had to come from somewhere, and somewhere had turned out to be here, much to everyone's collective disappointment. Joseph had arrived 9 days ago with a paid passage, a modest optimism, and a bag of tools. He now had the tools. The passage had vanished when the freighter he'd hitched with recalculated its route, apologized in the form of a data slip that dissolved his credits into processing fees, and departed without him. The optimism was hanging on by a thread, mostly out of spite. He sat in the depot cantina nursing a cup of something the menu insisted was coffee, and the taste insisted was a war crime. And he watched the Ardessi, the way a man watches weather he can't do anything about. They were everywhere, tall, blue-skinned, loud in a language that sounded like someone gargling gravel with great enthusiasm, their long ears twitching with every joke and jibe. To them, Joseph was a curiosity roughly on the level of an unusually shaped cloud, pinkish, round-eared, faintly ridiculous. Twice already someone had reached over to poke his ear, confirmed it did not in fact come to a point, and walked away visibly let down, as though he'd personally promised otherwise. "You're the human." This was said by the depot boss, a barrel-shaped Ardessi named Hudson, or something Joseph's translator rendered as Hudson, which he suspected lost a great deal in the crossing, who had planted himself across the table uninvited. The one who fixes things. "I'm the one who's stranded," Joseph said. "The fixing is more of a hobby I'm hoping becomes a career again." Hudson's ears flicked in a gesture Joseph had learned meant amusement, or possibly indigestion. The two looked identical, and he wasn't confident enough to bet on it. "Then I have good news," wearing a bad news costume. He leaned in. "Bay 9. There's a ship rotting in it. Starrunner, old model, took damage and never got fixed. Owner won't scrap it, won't leave it, won't let anyone touch it. 3 mechanics tried. 2 quit crying. 1 just quit." He spread his broad hands. "Fix it, and I'll waive your fuel debt and buy your passage off this rock myself. Fail, and you're no worse off than you are now, which is to say deeply." Joseph set down the coffee, which was the only genuinely wise decision he'd made all week. "What's the catch?" "The catch," said Hudson, with the air of a man enjoying himself, "is the owner." The catch was named Lucy, and Joseph met her 20 minutes later in the mouth of Bay 9, where she was standing guard over the ugliest, most abused starrunner he had ever seen, with the posture of someone daring the universe to comment. She was Ardessi, blue as deep water, ears long and swept back sharp, and she had her arms folded so tightly it looked less like a gesture and more like structural engineering. She looked him up and down, taking careful inventory of the human standing in her doorway, and arrived at a verdict. "No," she said, "I haven't said anything yet." "You were going to. It was going to be stupid. I'm saving us both the time." Her voice had an edge to it that could have stripped paint, and behind her the ship sat slumped and wounded, scorch marks fanning across its hull plating in a pattern Joseph's eye caught and filed away before his brain quite finished the thought. "Let me guess. Hudson sent you. Told you fixing this heap buys your ticket out. Sweet deal. Except it's my heap and I don't need help. And I, especially, don't need it from—" She waved a hand at all of him, top to bottom, as though his entire species were a typo. "Oh, whatever you are." "Human," Joseph offered. "The word is human. We're mostly harmless. Excellent with a hydrospanner. Terrible at minding our own business." I noticed the second one. He stepped past her, not rudely, just with the quiet single-mindedness of a man who'd found a puzzle and could no longer be reasoned with, and laid a hand on the starrunner's flank. Under the grime and the insults, he could feel it, the deep structural exhaustion of a machine that had been asked to do something no machine should survive, and had, somehow, survived it anyway. Beautiful old bones, held together with prayer and stubbornness, which coincidentally were his 2 best languages. "You're going to tell me it can't be fixed," he said. "It can't." "Right. And your last 3 mechanics agreed with you." He crouched, ducking under the belly of the ship where the worst of the damage puckered the hull, and looked up into the dark tangle of the wreck that absolutely, positively, should not have been able to fly, and he was increasingly certain recently had. "Funny thing about people who agree with you," he said, half to her and half to the ship. They never once bothered to disagree with the ship. Behind him, Lucy said nothing, which from her, he suspected, was practically a standing ovation. The first day, Lucy watched him from the gantry with the expression of a woman attending a funeral she'd RSVP'd to reluctantly. She did not offer tools. She did not offer coffee. She offered instead a running commentary of everything Joseph was about to do wrong, delivered in advance, like a weather report for disasters that hadn't happened yet. "You're going to strip that coupling." He did not strip the coupling. "That housing's fused, don't bother." It was fused, he bothered. It came free with a groan of tortured metal and a small shower of rust that landed mostly in his hair. "You're going to electrocute yourself on that relay." At this one he paused, looked at the relay, looked at her, and unplugged the relay because she had a point and he was fond of his heartbeat. "You could help," he said around noon, elbow deep in a conduit that smelled like a barbecue held inside a battery. "I could," Lucy agreed, not moving. That wasn't a no. It wasn't a yes either. Learn to tell them apart. It'll save your life someday. By the end of the first day, he'd cleared enough scorched plating to see what he'd suspected in the doorway, and what he saw made him go quiet in a way she noticed, because this wasn't wear. Wear was gentle, gradual, the slow forgiveness a machine grants to time. This was violence. The hull hadn't degraded. It had been shot, punched through by focused energy fire in a tight cluster along the port drive housing, the kind of grouping you only got when someone very good or very angry wanted this ship to stop existing and had come frighteningly close to their goal. Joseph ran a thumb along the melted lip of one puncture and said nothing about it. He'd learned that much about her already. Lucy handed out information the way a miser hands out inheritance, grudgingly, and only after death seemed imminent. He noticed the hold, too. Aft of the drive core, sealed behind a bulkhead she'd triple-locked with a security rig far too expensive for a ship this beaten, sat a cargo compartment she never once let him near. When his repairs drifted anywhere close, she materialized between him and the door like a very tall, very blue territorial dispute. He asked once what was in it. "Nothing that concerns a mechanic," she said, and the temperature of the words told him to file the question away for a warmer day. The second day, her crew found him. They arrived in a rowdy blue tide, 4 other pilots off ships parked in the neighboring bays, drawn by the novelty of a human doing something other than looking lost. They perched on crates, passed a flask of something that fizzed ominously, and treated Joseph's repair like the finest entertainment Halfrest had offered in months. They taught him Ardessi curses under the generous pretense of useful vocabulary. He'd deploy one, proud of himself, and Lucy would flinch on the gantry like he'd flung a plate, which only encouraged everyone tremendously. By afternoon, they'd adopted him the way you adopt a stray that wanders into your camp and refuses to be embarrassed about it. One of them, a broad pilot named Owen, Joseph's translator's best guess again, clapped him so hard on the back he lost a wrench down the drive shaft and spent 40 minutes retrieving it while the whole gallery narrated his struggle like a sporting event. "They like you," Lucy said that evening, sounding personally aggrieved by the fact. "People usually do. It's a curse. I've made peace with it. They like you because you're funny-looking and you can't hold your liquor and you say our words wrong." She was leaning in the bay's mouth, watching him work by the blue wash of the drive light. And for once, there was no armor in it, just tiredness, and something underneath the tiredness he couldn't name yet. "Don't mistake it for respect." "Wouldn't dream of it," he said. Then, because he was exhausted, and honesty came easier when the day had worn his defenses down to the studs. "You're not what I was warned about, you know. They told me you were made of razors and bad attitude." "I am. Sure. It's just, razors don't guard a wrecked ship for weeks on a dead rock instead of walking away. Razors don't check the seal on a cargo door 40 times a day." He met her eyes. "Razors don't worry. You're worried, Lucy. About what's behind that bulkhead, and about whoever pointed a gun at this ship, and about whether the fix takes. That's not a bad attitude. That's a person who's cornered and pretending she isn't." For a long moment she didn't answer. The drive light hummed. Somewhere in the depot, Owen was losing an argument loudly. "Fix the ship, human," she said at last. But the razors had gone out of it, and she didn't leave the doorway. And Joseph, bone-tired, filthy, 3 days behind on sleep, bent back over the wreck and kept working long past the point good sense recommended. Not for the passage anymore. Not for Hudson's debt. For the maddening, impossible woman glaring at him from the dark, who guarded a locked door like it was her own heart, and who, he was beginning to suspect, was very much worth the wrench down the drive shaft. The third night the ship came back to life. It didn't happen dramatically, whatever the pilots would later claim in retellings that grew more heroic with each flask. It happened the way most miracles actually happen, quietly, unglamorously, at an hour when sensible people were asleep. Joseph reconnected the last coupling, wiped his hands on a rag that had given up being a rag 2 days prior, and toggled the primary ignition sequence more out of stubborn hope than expectation. For a heartbeat, nothing, then a cough, deep in the drive core, then a second cough, then the starrunner's engines caught with a low, building roar that climbed through the deck plating and into Joseph's teeth, that filled Bay 9 with blue light and the clean electric smell of a machine remembering what it was for. The whole ship shuddered, settled, and began, impossibly, beautifully, to hum. Joseph stood there grinning like an idiot, filthy from hair to boots, and turned to find Lucy staring at her ship with an expression he'd never seen on her. Naked, undefended astonishment, the look of someone watching the dead sit up and ask for breakfast. That was when the cantina heard it. There is no sound in the galaxy quite like a dead ship coming home, and every pilot within 100 meters knew it in their bones. The cantina emptied in a rowdy blue stampede, flasks still in hand, and poured toward Bay 9 to see which fool had managed it. And the moment they crowded into the mouth of the bay and saw the humming starrunner, saw Lucy standing beside it looking stunned, and saw the grease-covered human standing next to her with a wrench still in his fist, the entire mob arrived at the same conclusion at the same catastrophic instant. It was Owen who started it, of course. He threw both arms wide, drew a breath large enough to require its own life support, and bellowed, "He fixed the unfixable ship! Marry a human! Marry a human!" The chant went up like a struck match. "Marry a human! Marry a human!" A dozen throats, then 2 dozen, stamping and clapping, the words bouncing off the bay walls and out into the depot's dark. It was merciless. It was joyful. It was, Joseph gathered from the sheer delighted cruelty of it, apparently the single funniest thing to happen on Halfrest in living memory. Lucy went sapphire, not blushing in the polite, rosy human way. She deepened, color flooding up her neck and into the tips of those long ears until she was practically luminous, a lighthouse warning ships away from her own embarrassment. "Shut up," she snarled at them. "All of you, shut up." It had no effect whatsoever except to raise the volume. "Oh, and I will personally reroute your ship's toilet into your cockpit." The chant swallowed the threat whole. And here was the thing Joseph noticed, the thing he'd turn over in his mind for a long time after. She didn't storm off. She had every exit available to her, a whole ship's worth, and she used none of them. She stood there beside her humming vessel, arms coming up to fold in that familiar architecture of self-defense, jaw set, glaring at her friends. And she could not, for all her fury, quite look at Joseph. And she was fighting hard with the whole of her considerable stubbornness against something happening at the corner of her mouth. Losing, incrementally. A twitch, a tightness. The ghost of a smile she absolutely refused to grant them the satisfaction of. Joseph, who had the survival instincts of a man who'd spent his life saying the wrong thing at the right moment, opened his mouth to make it worse. He never got the chance. The depot's warning klaxon shattered the whole scene, a rising 3-tone shriek that killed the chant instantly, that every pilot in that bay knew the way prey knows a shadow. Above Halfrest, tearing a bruise-colored wound in the night sky, a ship dropped out of jump. It was long and scarred and painted in the dull matte gray of people who wanted very badly not to be identified, and it hung over the depot with the patient menace of a debt collector who has finally found you. Lucy's face went from sapphire to ash. "No," she breathed. "No, not now." "Friends of yours?" Joseph asked. "The people who shot my ship." She was already moving, hauling him by the front of his coveralls toward the open hatch with a strength that brooked no discussion. Get in the ship, human, unless you'd like to explain to a syndicate enforcer why you're the one who just made me flyable again." That's a compelling argument, actually. Joseph found himself half-dragged, half-leaping through the hatch as the drive he'd resurrected with his own two hands screamed up to full power beneath him. Behind them, the pilots scattered, Owen roaring something that might have been a blessing, and might have been another verse of the chant. The starrunner lifted off Bay 9's scorched deck for the first time in weeks, tore free of Halfrest's meager gravity, and threw itself at the open sky with the gray ship already turning, already burning, already coming. Halfrest fell away beneath them like a bad memory, and Joseph discovered that being inside the ship he'd fixed was a substantially more intimate way to learn whether he'd fixed it correctly. Every rattle in the hull was now a personal referendum on his competence. He strapped into the seat beside Lucy's, watched her hands move over the controls with the fluency of someone who'd been flying this exact ship since before it learned to bleed, and decided that his coupling work would either hold or it wouldn't, and there was very little dignity to be gained by worrying about it out loud. "So," he said, as the gray ship's first ranging shot burned past the viewport close enough to leave spots in his vision, "this feels like a conversation we should have had while I was still, technically, on the ground. You'd have run. I absolutely would have run. That's my whole point. It was a good option and you took it from me." She threw the starrunner into a roll that put Joseph's breakfast on notice, and the gray ship's second shot went wide. "The hold," she said, and something in the word made him stop being funny. "You wanted to know what's in the hold. Fine. Gene Med serum. 40,000 doses of it, packed cold, bound for Vesk." Vesk means nothing to me. It's a colony. Ardessi, third generation, out past the shipping lanes where nobody looks. Her jaw worked. 2 years ago, a syndicate, the polite word is syndicate, bought up Vesk's debt, every scrap of it, and then blockaded the system. No supplies in unless you pay their toll, and the toll goes up every cycle, on purpose, forever, until the whole colony belongs to them, bodies included. They've got a wasting sickness spreading down there, and the only cure is behind my bulkhead. And the syndicate knows it, which is why... She jerked her head at the gray ship swelling in the rear scopes. "They've been trying to turn me into scrap since the day I took the run." Joseph looked at the sealed door aft, then at her, and several things he'd catalogued over 3 days rearranged themselves into a shape he didn't like. "You've been running a blockade alone. Everyone told you it couldn't be done, so you decided to do it by yourself, on a ship they'd already half killed. Someone had to. Someone had to, so it had to be you." He laughed, short and disbelieving. "You are the single most infuriating person I have ever nearly died beside, and I want you to know the competition was fierce." "Asteroid belt," she snapped. And there it was, filling the whole forward view, a churning gray river of rock that Vesk apparently kept as a doormat. Hold on to something, preferably not me. What followed was 4 of the worst and best minutes of Joseph's life. Lucy threaded the starrunner into the belt like a needle through a riot, tumbling rock filling every window, and the gray ship, bigger, meaner, but not hers, followed anyway, unwilling to lose her now. A near miss clipped the port drive housing right where his fresh weld sat, and every warning light on the panel bloomed red at once. "That's the coupling," Lucy said through her teeth. "Your coupling? My coupling is fine. It's the interface manifold that's... Okay, it's also possibly the coupling." Joseph was already out of his harness, wedging himself into the drive access with a roll of adhesive banding clamped in his teeth, and a stream of the Ardessi curses Owen had so generously taught him, deployed now with real conviction. He found the fault by feel, a fractured feed line spitting coolant, and did the only thing 3 days of no sleep and 1 lifetime of bad luck had prepared him for. He wrapped it in banding, jammed his palm over it, and held the ship together with duct tape and profanity while Lucy flew them through a wall of moving mountains. "Left," he shouted. "I know left. I'm the pilot. Then go left with more enthusiasm." She went left with genuinely alarming enthusiasm. The gray ship, committing to the same gap a half-second later, clipped a tumbling boulder the size of a house and spun off into the dark, engines flaring as its pilot fought to stay whole. Not destroyed, but bought them distance, bought them the far side of the belt and open black beyond it, Vesk a pale marble growing in the distance. Joseph crawled back into his seat, coolant-soaked, shaking, grinning that idiot grin. Lucy was breathing hard, both hands still locked on the controls, and she looked over at him, the human she hadn't wanted, who'd fixed her ship and then bled for it, with something that had traveled a very long way from no. Neither of them said anything about a chant on a desert rock. But it sat there between them, in the humming quiet, no longer entirely a joke. And when her hand left the controls for a moment and brushed his, checking he was real, checking he was whole, she didn't pull it back as fast as she could have, which, from Lucy, was practically a wedding. They came out of the belt's shadow to find Vesk waiting, and Vesk was worse than Lucy had described, which Joseph hadn't thought possible. The colony hung in the dark, a scatter of habitat rings and surface domes, and strung around it like a noose was the blockade. Not a fleet. Just one squat, ugly enforcer platform bristling with more weapons than a place that small had any right to carry, positioned exactly where every incoming ship had to pass. Below it, small and desperate, a cluster of colony landers sat grounded on the surface, waiting for a cure that had spent 2 years failing to arrive. "There's the toll booth," Joseph said. "There's the toll booth." Lucy's voice had gone flat and careful, the voice of someone doing math she didn't like the answer to. "It'll hail us. It'll offer terms. When I refuse, it'll open fire, and this ship can survive exactly one of the things it's about to do to us. So." She keyed the comm to the colony's frequency, quick and low. "Vesklanders, this is the serum run. I'm coming in hot, and I'm coming in once. Be ready to receive the moment I break atmosphere, because I will not get a second pass." A voice answered, cracked with static and something worse, hope so old it had calcified into disbelief. "Serum run, we've heard that before. Prove it's you. I'm the idiot who's been trying to reach you for 2 years and keeps getting shot for the trouble. Enough proof?" A long, crackling pause. Then, softly, "Sky's open for you. Run. All of us. Come home." The enforcer hailed on cue, a bored syndicate voice reciting terms like a menu, and Lucy cut it off mid-word. The platform's weapons swung toward them, and Joseph understood with sudden clarity that flying straight at 40 guns was not a plan. It was a very fast obituary, and that Lucy, jaw set, was fully prepared to try it anyway because it was the only card she'd ever been dealt. "Don't!" he said, already unbuckling. "Don't do the brave, stupid thing. Give me 60 seconds and I'll give you the clever, stupid thing, which is much more my area." "We don't have 60. 59 then." He was into the drive access again, but this time not to fix, to break, carefully, on purpose, because he knew this ship now. Knew it the way you know a thing you've held together with your own hands, and he knew the depot-grade fuel cells Hudson's fuel had left crammed in her tanks were cheap, volatile, and wildly overspec'd for a drive this size. He'd spent 3 days keeping them from doing exactly what he was now about to make them do. "Lucy, when I say, cut the drive shielding, all of it, full open. That'll make us look like we're about to detonate. Yes. Like a reactor breach half a second from turning us into a very brief sunrise. They'll read the signature, and no bounty in the galaxy is worth being inside the blast radius of. So they'll break off and burn for distance, because syndicate enforcers are paid to collect debts, not to die for them." He jammed the last override and hurled himself back toward his seat. "The gap that buys you, that's your one pass. Take it." For one breath, Lucy stared at him, the human who'd been on her ship for less than an hour and had already found a way to weaponize her own fuel tank. "You're insane," she said. "I'm stranded," Joseph corrected. "It's adjacent. Now, cut it." She cut the shielding. The starrunner bloomed on every sensor in the system as a drive core screaming toward catastrophic breach, and the effect on the enforcer platform was immediate and deeply gratifying. Its guns hesitated. Its thrusters flared. Whatever underpaid syndicate soul was running it did the exact math Joseph had bet on. No debt is worth this, and hauled the whole platform sideways, breaking off its firing line, burning hard for the safe distance that a detonating reactor demanded. And into the gap it left, Lucy flew like she'd been born for it. She dropped the starrunner into Vesk's atmosphere in a howling, controlled fall, the hull shrieking, the fresh welds groaning their opinion, and Joseph white-knuckled his harness and kept his very best curses ready in case they were needed. The sealed bulkhead unlocked with a hiss. The aft hatch blew clear the instant the landers rose to meet them, and 40,000 cold doses of a cure 2 years overdue passed hand to hand into colony arms in the space of 90 frantic seconds. Blue hands and one pair of pink ones, all moving as fast as bodies could move. Then the landers fell away toward home, cargo aboard, and the Enforcer, realizing far too late that no reactor had breached, that it had been chased off by a bluff and a fuel tank, came about with murder in its heart. But the blockade was already broken. The serum was already down. And there was nothing left above Vesk worth the Enforcer's dying for, and both ships knew it. It fired once, wild and furious, and Lucy was already gone, hauling the starrunner back toward open black, leaving the toll booth screaming at an empty sky. In the sudden quiet, breathing hard, she looked at Joseph, coolant-stained, alive, absurd, and dropped the last of the armor she'd worn since the day he walked into her bay. "Ardessi don't marry humans," she said, apropos of everything. "You understand that. It's not done. There are rules." "I got that impression, yes." "I have never," Lucy said, steering them home, "cared very much about what I'm supposed to do." Vesk did not, at first, believe it was saved. This is the tragedy of people kept desperate too long. The good news has to knock several times before they'll open the door. But the sickness began to turn within a day. The wasting halted. The youngest and weakest steadied first, and by the time Lucy brought the starrunner down onto Vesk's main dome for repairs and rest, the colony had progressed from disbelief through tears and arrived, finally, at something like riot. They mobbed the ship. They mobbed Lucy, the smuggler who'd taken the run everyone swore was suicide and had gotten shot for 2 years rather than quit. And they mobbed, to his enormous surprise, Joseph, the human who'd made the impossible ship fly and then flown it into a blockade with duct tape and a bluff. Someone pressed a child into his arms who would live now specifically because of him and Joseph D., who had spent his whole life being the funny stranded one, the round-eared curiosity, the man whose luck ran out at every port, found he had no joke ready, for once. He just held the kid and looked at Lucy across the crowd and understood that somewhere between Halfrest and here, he had stopped being a man things happened to and become a man who made things happen. It was a strange feeling. He decided he liked it. The syndicate did not recover. A blockade only works if the debtors believe it's unbreakable, and Lucy had broken it in front of an entire colony that promptly, gleefully told every other blockaded system within comm range exactly how she'd done it. Enforcer platforms are expensive. Running them is only profitable when nobody fights back. And once everybody started fighting back, the arithmetic that had made Vesk a prison quietly made it worthless. The gray ships pulled out within the month, off to menace easier ledgers. The toll booth above Vesk was towed down and, in an act of poetry Joseph deeply approved of, converted into the colony's new water reclamation plant. He liked to think the Enforcer who'd fled his fuel tank bluff heard about that. He hoped it stung. Hudson forgave Joseph's fuel debt without being asked, on the grounds that a man who fixes the unfixable ship and then vanishes off the rock in it while syndicate guns rain down has, in the depot boss's professional opinion, more than settled his tab. He also, it emerged, had been taking bets in the cantina the entire time on whether Joseph would fix the ship, whether he'd survive Lucy, and, at absurd odds, on the outcome of a certain chant. Hudson had bet on all three. Hudson was now, by Halfrest standards, wealthy, which was why they went back. Not because they had to. The galaxy was wide open now, no one hunting them, the whole clear sky theirs. They went back because Owen and the crew were still there, and because Lucy, for all her thorns, was not the sort to let a debt of friendship rust in a bay. The starrunner set down on Halfrest for the second time whole, gleaming where Joseph had rebuilt it, humming that deep, contented hum, and the cantina emptied in a rowdy blue tide the instant it landed, same as before, same stampede, same flasks. Except this time they already knew the ending, And this time the two who climbed down the ramp were standing very close together and not pretending otherwise. Owen saw it first. Of course he did. He filled his considerable lungs. "Marry a human!" he roared, and the whole cantina took it up like they'd been holding it in for weeks. "Marry a human! Marry a human!" Stamping, clapping, merciless, joyful, the words bouncing off the bay walls and out into the desert dark, exactly as they had that first impossible night. Lucy went sapphire. She always would, Joseph suspected. Some things the bravest person alive simply can't help. But this time she didn't snarl at them to shut up. This time she didn't fold her arms into that old architecture of defense, didn't fight the thing happening at the corner of her mouth, didn't refuse them the satisfaction. This time she turned to Joseph in front of the whole roaring lot of them, deep blue and unarmored, and looking at him the way she'd looked at her ship the night it came back from the dead, like something she hadn't dared believe in, sitting up and asking for breakfast. "I still don't need your help," she informed him over the chant. "I want that on record. I have never needed it. I fixed that blockade myself, and I'll have you know." "Noted," said Joseph, loudly, "for the record. And I don't care what I'm supposed to do," she finished, quieter, just for him. "And I'm going to do this now, so try not to make it stupid. I make everything stupid. It's a curse. I've made peace with." She took his grease-stained hand in her blue one, and she kissed him, and the cantina came apart. Owen fell off his crate. Somebody fired a flare. The chant collapsed into wordless, triumphant noise, and Hudson, somewhere in the back, collected on the last and best bet of his life. And Joseph, the stranded human, the round-eared curiosity, the man whose luck had run out at every port in the galaxy until it ran out at exactly the right one, kissed her back beneath a sky finally, wholly clear of anyone hunting them, while the desert wind carried up the laughter and the ridiculous, wonderful, now entirely true words. He'd come to Halfrist with a bag of tools and nothing else. He was leaving with the ship he'd resurrected, the woman who'd flown it into hell beside him, and the sure knowledge that the best thing he'd ever fixed had, in the fixing, quietly fixed him right back. Joseph came to Halfrest believing his luck had finally run out, that being stranded was the end of his story, not the beginning of it. And isn't that the quiet trick life keeps playing on all of us? The worst place we ever land, the job no one else will touch, the person the whole world warned us to keep our distance from. How often does the thing we'd have run from turn out to be the very thing we were meant to find? He didn't fix that ship for love. He fixed it because he was broke and stubborn and couldn't walk past a puzzle. But somewhere between the scorched hull and the sealed door, between the razor tongue and the worry she hid underneath it, he stopped being a man that things happened to, and became a man who chose, who stayed when staying was foolish, who bled for something that wasn't his, and in doing so, made it his. So let me leave you with this, wherever you're watching from tonight. What if the door you've been told not to knock on is the one with your whole life behind it? What if the person who insists they don't need you is the one fighting hardest not to smile? And what if the best thing you ever repair, the truly impossible thing, turns out, in the quiet after, to be the part of you that you thought was beyond fixing? Lucy never did need his help. That was always true. But need was never the point. Some people we don't choose because we have to. We choose them because against every rule we were handed, we simply, stubbornly, wonderfully do. And maybe that's the only kind of miracle any of us ever really gets. The end. Lucy and Joseph's story ends here, friends. Before we go, don't forget to like the story and leave your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to Sci-Fi Traveler so you don't miss the next story. See you again in the next science fiction story. Goodbye.